Hi, my name is Ben Plessier and I am a fervent user of Wappler. With this video, I will show you how to create a user login and logout system. This is where we left off in the last video, where we created a customer registration form inside a modal. Now that there is an existing customer, they are now able to log in. When they are logged in, the left column goes blank, making way for the payment details. This will be shown in the next video. There is a Logout button and the shipping details. When I log out, the previous screen reappears. The registration procedure has also changed. This now logs the customer in after having completed the registration form. I hope that this has whetted your appetite enough for you to watch the whole video. As is my habit, I first turn to the server side. I have found that a well thought through back end greatly assists when developing the front end. Off I go to the Workflows tab. Login and Logout has everything to do with security. As part of the security, Wappler has a nifty widget called Security Provider. Here I add a new security provider and named it Customers. Actually, you can name it anything you want. I have chosen Customers because in a future video, I will be adding a second security provider for administrators. This has added the customer security provider to the customer's JSON file. In the Properties panel, I choose the data from the database. Opening the security provider dialog, I enter the data table details. No need for permissions, because these are the customers that we are dealing with. In the previous video, I used the password hash to encrypt the password. This same hash has to be selected here. Don't forget to save the file. Next, I go to the Globals tab and Security Provider under Actions. Then I select the security identity and drag it to the execute line in the JSON file. I give it a recognizable name. And finish off by saving the file. Time out for an explanation. When a user is logged in, the security identity has the value of the user ID. If no user is logged in, the security identity is empty. As I proceed with this video, this will become clear. The reason for placing the security identity under Globals is so that it will remain available throughout the site. Next comes the customer login. For this, I go to the security folder and add an API with an appropriate name. In the JSON file, I add the form inputs that I want in my form. I start with the Honeypot field, called username. This field will contain the secret key that was explained in the previous video. I make it a required field. Then come, email, and password, followed by a remember checkbox. This creates a cookie making subsequent logins a little easier. I must not forget the session variable, carrying the secret key. In the execute tree, I place a condition. This condition is enacted when the posted username is different to the secret key. This means that the honeypot has been triggered. The condition gets a response of unauthorized. Below the conditional region, I add a set value. This reflects the value of the posted email converted to lowercase. Lastly, I select the Security Provider tab, and Security Login. In the Properties panel, I change the value of the username to the converted email. This username is the equivalent of the email field that I entered as an input value. Save the file. Every login needs a logout. Here I add the next API. Under the Security Provider tab, I select Security Logout and drag it into the JSON file. And that is it. Save the file. When a customer has logged in, I want to be able to display the details of that customer. For this, I add another API. For the action, I select the Database Actions tab, and drag the single query into the JSON file. In the Query Builder, I select the database table. Then I add the fields that I want to be able to show. For the condition, I select the customer ID. This has to be matched to the security identity. If I leave the JSON file as is, initially this would be loaded when the user has not logged in. Because there is no customer ID and no security identity, this will throw an error in the console panel. To overcome this, I add a condition and move the query inside the condition. For the condition, I select the security identity. If this is empty, then the query will not be executed. Save the file. There is one other matter that has to be dealt with. To make the registration process as easy as possible, I want the user to be automatically logged in. I go to the Customer's API folder and select the Upsert API. In the JSON file, I expand the steps. Login will be the last step on the falsy side. I go to the Security Provider, and select Login. This is dragged into position. As with the Login API, I change the value of the username to the converted email. Save the file. And we're done for the backend. The Login button is placed in the navigation bar, making it available throughout the site. To achieve this, I start by adding 3 server connects to the layout page. The first is for the secret key. Make sure that it is not autoloaded. The second is to show the details for the logged in customer. The last is to log the user out. I now add a modal at the end of the page. This will house the login form. My apologies for the bootstrap grid lines. While working on this video, a query was posted in the community on the subject. I decided to check for myself and forgot to reset the option. On with the task at hand. Give the modal an ID. And set the fade in and out mode. Change the modal title. And change the button texts. Remove the body text. And we are ready to insert the login form inside the modal body. This is done by going to the Generators tab and selecting Form Generator. Inside the Form Generator dialog, I choose Security and customer login. For the form type, I have gone for a vertical form. But the choice is yours to make. I remove the Submit button. The button in the modal footer will be used instead. Lastly, the Remember field becomes a checkbox rather than a text field. We now have the login form inside a modal. With the form selected, give it an ID. Then scroll down to Dynamic Events. I select Server Connect, Success. For the actions, a success notification. A logged in Server Connect load. And a modal hide. This process is more or less repeated for unauthorized and error messages. Now to add the secret key to the username input. With the input selected, I scroll down to Dynamic Attributes. Here I select Input, Value. For the value, I choose Server Connect Secret Key, and my key. Further down the form, I select the label for the checkbox. This is removed. Then with the checkbox selected, I give it a value of 1. This value will be passed on to the backend. This in turn creates a cookie containing the login details. Nearing the end, I select the Login button. Because this button resides outside of the form, this cannot be a normal Submit button. Instead, I assign a mouse on click event. For the action, I select Form, Submit. When the modal is hidden, either by a form submit or a cancellation, the form has to be reset to remove any existing data. This is done by selecting the modal itself and Dynamic Events. In the pop-up, choose Modal, Hide. For the action, the form is reset. The last finishing touches. The first is to hide the username input. As explained in the previous video, this is done by hiding each of the screen sizes. Then, to change the form input IDs. Select the current ID prefix, hit Ctrl or Command H, and enter the new prefix in the replace box. In my case I have named it log. But this can be anything to your liking, as long as it remains unique within the document. Save the file and we are done with the login form. With the form finished, I now need to add a button to show the login form. I select the header and right-click on the shopping cart button. After the cart button, I add a conditional region. Why a condition? I only want to show the login button when a customer has not yet logged in. The button should be hidden and replaced by a logout button once the customer has logged in. After assigning a recognizable ID, I set the stage for the condition. In the expression builder, I select the customer identity. For the expression I set, is empty. In other words, show the contents of the conditional region when the customer has not logged in. Inside the condition, I add a button. The button gets the usual button treatment, including adding an icon. The action toggle gets the value of the login modal. Scrolling down to dynamic events, I add a mouse on click event. For the action, the secret key server connect is loaded. The Logout button gets a similar treatment to the Login button. That is, a conditional region that shows when the security identity contains a value. In other words, when the customer is logged in. Inside the condition, comes the button. But because no one is logged in, the button is hidden. To reveal the button in the canvas, I turn App Connect off. This allows me to change the button text and add an icon. Scrolling down to dynamic events, I add a mouse on click event. For the actions, I add the server-side logout API and reset the customer logged in API. Save the file and we are done with the main layout page. For the last part of this video, I turn to the checkout page. The first item on my list is the secret key server connect. When I go back to the layout page, we see that it has already been added here. Thus remove it from the checkout page. To be able to see all of the hidden items in the canvas, I turn App Connect mode off. This is the part of the page that I want to hide when the user is logged in. To do this, I add a container for the current elements. In this case, Wappler limits us to using a flex container. Make sure that the flex container is column orientated. The default orientation is row. Grab the first element and drag it inside the flex container. This would need to be repeated for each of the consecutive elements, which I have found to be very laborious. Hence, I have gone into Code View, selected the remaining elements, and dragged them into the flex container. Selecting the flex container, I scroll down to Dynamic Attributes. Here I select Display and Show. For the when, I choose Customer Identity. And is empty. Save the file and test in a browser. When the customer has logged in, the left column is blanked out in readiness of the payment details. All that is left are the shipping details. Here I first select the paragraph, and show it when the customer has not logged in. That is, when the customer security is empty. For the shipping details, I add a conditional region after the paragraph. This will be the container for the data. I give it a unique and identifiable ID. For the condition, I select the customer security. Not empty. In other words, the customer has logged in. Inside the condition, I add a table. The table is populated by the data that is retrieved from the logged-in server connect. The form gets a bit of styling. And the two unwanted fields are removed. As it stands, the table columns automatically adjust the widths to the content. My preference is to set the header column to a set width, in this case 25%. The content of the first name field is changed to also include the last name. After which the last name row is deleted. The label text of the name field is changed. That completes the shipping details section. The very last item on my list is to show the modal when the login button is pressed. I first select the button and set the action toggle to the login modal. This is the problem I am facing using this version of Wappler on the beta channel. I cannot select the login modal from the layout page. I have posted a bug report, so that the matter will be resolved in future versions of Wappler. For now, let me show you a workaround. Choose the available option. Then in Code View, change Register to Login. If you do not remember the ID, then go back to the layout page, where you can take a copy. Back to where I diverted. Remembering the Honeypot input, I scroll down to Dynamic Events. Here I select the mouse on Click Event. For the action, I load the secret key Server Connect. Actually, there is one more thing that I did not have on my list, but is most important. When I created the server-side APIs, I added an automatic login after registration. This requires the logged-in customer server connect to be loaded. This is because the security identity now has a value. To do this, I select the registration form inside the modal. In the Properties panel, I go to the Success attribute, and load the relevant server connect. Save the file, and we are done. The time has come for testing.